Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one man review. Always a good day when there's a new Tim Lane book. And we do have not just a new Tim Lane book, but a new series. So this is issue one of Tim Lane's new Mythologies and Apocrypha. I don't know if the American Happy Hour book is still coming out. I know he's still working on finishing his Steve McQueen graphic novel, but this has Steve McQueen content in it. That's one of the things that I've really come to love about Tim's process, his working process, is he'll kind of just release stories multiple times in multiple places and then collect them together in different ways. And at first that felt like a cheat to me, like, man, I've already paid for this before. But he's so good at like changing the meaning of a story based on what other stories he puts around it, that I've become a big fan of, like what I call a kaleidoscope approach. And Tim's probably the guy that, like, the way he works cued me into that, and so I always really appreciate that in his work. And then obviously, as a fan of like really awesome pen and ink, black and white realist art, I'm a huge fan of what he's doing with his art. Awesome design all throughout. And Tim has such a clear and concise focus in all of his work on the American myth, and more recently, it seems like that's been the American myth as relates to images of masculinity. And he both appreciates it, loves it, celebrates it, but also is willing to like critically evaluate it. It's not just a diatribe about toxic masculinity. It acknowledges where it goes wrong, but it also seems to revel in, where it goes right. And so I really appreciate that as like a theme that he's exploring, and I think he's exploring it with a lot of research and a lot of love and care, and then putting that together into these really beautifully illustrated packages. I mean, the dude can draw his ass off. He cross hatches his ass off. Exactly up the lane of like the type of stuff I was excited about that got me involved in Strange Death. This photorealistic pen and ink art. Obviously, Tim has a little bit more cartooning to what he does than what I would do, but I like that. I think his faces are more expressive for it. So in this one, we're getting a lot of information about Frank Sinatra, which is really interesting to me because my grandma was a huge Frank Sinatra fan. Like, she was skipping school and going, like, even before he was like a huge name, she was skipping school from living in Buffalo, New York, and traveling down to Brooklyn or into Manhattan to see him playing small clubs when he was first getting popular. So it's talking about the women following him around, and knowing that my grandmother was one of those, pretty funny. And then also kind of talking about his career revival. And then particularly, like, as someone who doesn't know much about any of this I had to go look it up on the internet. Really interesting. This instance where Elvis had come back from war, and they were doing like a welcome back Elvis, and they had him singing next to Sinatra, and apparently Sinatra just smoked him so hard that Elvis got all like embarrassed and kind of had a hard time performing on camera. So cool to learn that. Cool to go back and see the really blurry footage of that. Cool to see a really like nice, been changed into a high resolution drawing here. Really getting a sense of like how things were promoted back then, like how our society constructed these heroes. It's just all very, very interesting stuff, and like beautifully composed, beautifully drawn pages. We get more of the Steve McQueen stuff in here. We also find out about a group of people that supposedly, it's hard to tell with Tim Lane how much of it is just him exaggerating or mixing together different mythologies and how much of it's real. Like, it may have been that these five people, Steve McQueen, Jimmy Arness, Desi Arnaz, and Sammy Davis Jr., did like to do sharpshooting. That could be true, but I doubt that they met out in, shooting at a spaceship thing with these masks on and stuff. So he has a real good way of like scattering historical truth with like these kind of strange surreal images to keep the book just compelling and visually interesting. And when you're dealing with mythology, you are intentionally dealing with distortion of fact and like how things get blown oversized, and so that's totally appropriate. And just some amazing artwork. Tim is also really good at style switching. He's really good at production trickery. So you can get some of these things here where he's working in a more old school cartooning style. Colors introduced. There's like these real aging textures applied very well. And then Fantagraphics has done a fantastic job printing his stuff. In some of my earlier reviews, I complained a little bit about they don't seem capable of handling Tim's finest lines, and I still think there's some where it feels like it's breaking up, but this production feels much better than any of the other Tim Lane stuff I've seen. The only times where it looks more like how Fantagraphics used to do it is on the pages where there's color in there. Then the line work is obviously printed as a halftone or diffusion dither or something. The lines get fuzzier and they're printed as dots, whereas on these pages they look like they're actually printed as lines. I think that's still a solvable problem. You could just make a file that had, like, I think what's happening is this is all getting sent in as one half-toned image rather than these are half-toned and this is not, and the file, the plates are being burned that way. But that's like a pretty minor thing, because throughout the rest of the book, like, it's just really stunning reproduction of some insanely detailed art with some insanely fine lines. And then we get this other story here called The Junk Man, which is one that I've either seen this character or maybe this exact story somewhere else. That's part of what's cool about Tim's kaleidoscope approach, is I know I've at least seen this character. I feel like I've read this story before, but maybe also one where he's talking to a different character. But these are all kind of broken up and scattered, and so that's kind of like how mythology works too. Like, you kind of come back to the same thing, but you're seeing it in new context. You're kind of getting your memory involved, and so it gives that weird, like, uneasy deja vu feeling. And I think Tim's art really, like the way he uses blacks and whites and grays, and the way he does like triple lighting on a face or lighting from underneath, he really is able to create this ambiance of the unsettling, the uncanny. And I think his practice where he'll not be afraid to use a story in multiple places kind of adds to that, or as most people, I would complain about it, but for Tim it really works. And then just some style play in the end here. We've got a bit about a guy, who has all this old technology in here. And then we have more of like a Chris Ware looking like Acme Novelty Library type of design here, and kind of more of a very, very cartoony approach. Again, a lot of these production tricks where you're making things look like they're done with the old Ben Day dots really big, things like that. So just so much to appreciate in what Tim does. Then all of these fake ads that are, again, kind of like the Chris Ware thing, but unlike Chris Ware where he's just doing it for like the look of it, or he's complaining the whole time or whatever, it's kind of like gags. Like, this is all very focused on that theme of the myth of American masculinity and stuff. So really, really tight packages all throughout, that also have this like kaleidoscopic looseness in them where they can be modular and reshuffled. And I really appreciate that about Tim's work. So always excited. Some color stuff in here as well. Just phenomenal craftsmanship, phenomenal writing, phenomenal production, just well considered, thoughtful product all the way through. And I think everyone who loves comics should be reading these. The Eisner nominated The Strange Death of Alex Raymond by Dave Sim and myself. This is a gorgeously illustrated and designed book, Dave doing most of the illustration. Amazing compositions throughout. What Dave is doing is he's recording his obsession with the death of master cartoonist Alex Raymond behind the wheel of Stan Drake's car when they got into a car crash. The best description of the book that I've heard is that it's like understanding comics with pages like this, mixed with something like From Hell, when you get into the theories about what actually happened with the car crash. And then with Sean on production, it's just one of the most gorgeously printed books you could get a hold of.